I am Dave Lochran. That is Adam Scher. Two-man show today. 6-game main slate. How you feeling, bruh?
Good. I mean, the slate's pretty ugly. I'm not feeling great about talking about it, but the 6 to 9 game slate's been pretty nice this year. So looking forward to that.
You know, the pitching on this one is super weird because, like, Berrios' projected ownership is through the roof, but he's also someone that's had like 20 fantasy points maybe 3 or 4 times this season. I mean, he's a good pitcher, but he's better in real life. And it'll be interesting to see how that breaks down. And then you get into these other guys, a number of other names, whether it be Suarez or whether it be Wade LeBlanc or hell, whether it even be like um, uh, Plutko and Brett Anderson. There's there's a lot on this slate that'll at least give us some room for discussion.
Yeah, for sure. It's a slate where I think ownership's going to be really important, especially with pitching. I mean, it's really obvious, I think, where you should go for pitching in like cash games and where like everyone's projections are going to say the same thing. So I think that being different and factoring in a way to get away from the field in these large field tournaments is going to be important.
Absolutely. Um, so we've got 6 games, and a lot of them are pretty ugly. We've got a few totals that are pretty high, namely the LA Angels here uh, against it should be. I'm assuming Eshelman. You think so?
Yeah, I think it's Yacobonis opening and then
Right,
Eshelman following.
right. So that would be my assumption. Um, all right, let's dive right into it. Boston and New York. Rick Porcello, Masahiro Tanaka, as I like to say, the most enigmatic pitcher in the league. But honestly, Adam, it hasn't even been that way this year. He's just been very pedestrian outside of one or two good starts. And as far as Porcello goes, he'll get ownership on days where he's cheap and where he has a good matchup. But generally speaking, it's been a disaster for him, especially recently. I mean, he's allowed 6 earned runs in 3 of his last 4 starts. Over the last month, 5 starts, it's been an absolute unmitigated disaster for Porcello. And let's not act like he's been the recipient of bad luck. He's faced Baltimore over that span, Toronto, Detroit, Toronto. He faced the Yankees in there, but like he's had a pretty easy string of matchups and he's blown all of them.
Yeah, it feels weird on a slate with pitching that's as questionable as this one to kind of, at least in my case, be writing off Porcello and Tanaka. But if looking at projected ownership right now on DraftKings, Porcello is 6,400. So it's an appealing price tag. But he's projected for 19% ownership, facing a Yankees team with a 5.7 implied run total, which is, I believe, the second highest on the slate to the Angels. He's been bad this year, like you said. He's never been a great strikeout pitcher. He, at points in his career, has been okay at preventing runs. This year, he's been much worse against lefties than righties, but he's still been bad against righties. He's only struck out 20% of right-handed hitters. He's allowed a 182 ISO, 325 WOBA to righties, and no Gary Sanchez in the lineup for the Yankees. But other than that, basically full strength. Tons of power, 1 through 7, with LeMahieu leading off, Torres hitting seventh, Mike Tauchman and Kyle Higashioka, the only two real question marks in this lineup. So I'm going to just get to a lot of Yankees bats here. If Porcello manages to pick up strikeouts and prevent runs, and this is the start that he manages to do it in, then so be it.
Yeah, what about Tanaka? Obviously, both teams have, uh, or both pitchers have ugly matchups. Both teams have implied run totals that are north of 5.4 for Boston, 5.7 for the Yankees. I mean, is this a spot you're ignoring pitching altogether, or does Tanaka do something for you?
I think Tanaka is worth a look on FanDuel and on Yahoo. He's $8,000 on FanDuel. He's $34 on Yahoo. He's 10-1 on DraftKings. I'm not getting to him there. I don't feel super comfortable about that just because of the 12 pitchers on the slate, he's clearly one of the best in terms of talent. But it is still a really tough matchup against the Red Sox, who have one of the lowest strikeout percentages against right-handed pitching, one of the best offenses in terms of run production. And you mentioned it, leading into this game, it's not even like Tanaka has done his usual this year of striking out a lot of guys and giving up a lot of home runs.
Right.
He's given up home runs, 1.46 home runs per 9 innings, but he only has a 20.3% strikeout percentage. So it's not even like he's been, the great pitcher this year that we've seen in the past. So if he breaks he's capable of breaking the slate, which is why I'm kind of scared about not having him on DraftKings. But if I have to choose, if I'm only going to roster two out of Giolito, Barrios, and Tanaka, it's going to be Giolito and Barrios.
Tanaka is going to be so minimally owned on DraftKings because of that ridiculous price point. Honestly, I'd be okay with losing because I didn't pay 5 figures for Tanaka.
Right. Like I crunched lineups before the show, and I had enough time to use our ownership projections and kind of get an idea of if the slate started right now where I'd be at. And even though I don't have a good projection on Giolito compared to Barrios, I have Tanaka's projection so much lower than either of those guys that even accounting for him being essentially unowned, he didn't get into lineups.
Right. That's how I feel as well. What about hitters? Again, both teams with high projected totals for good reason. Two of the best power-packed offenses in the league, specifically the New York Yankees, but Boston's certainly no slouch either. And then weather in Boston, high to mid 70s here. Nothing crazy, but certainly not unfavorable either.
Yeah, I have plenty of interest in both offenses. We already talked about Porcello really struggling this year. I wish there were more left-handed power on the Yankees, but Didi and Hicks, both stand out as power bats from the left side. It's not like Porcello has been great against righties either, and this park does play up right-handed power more than left-handed power, so it's still favorable for all the righties in this lineup. The only thing that is disappointing about the Yankees is that obviously you can only get one of Encarnacion or Voit into your lineup unless you're playing on FanDuel. So that's really the only thing negative that I can say about the Yankees. And then on the other side for Boston, 5.4 implied run total, relatively high total here. Tanaka's a good enough pitcher, but he has a 4.2 xFIP this year. He's allowed nearly 1.5 home runs per 9, like I said, and it's just a really talented Boston offense. So on my initial crunch on DraftKings, I was getting, I think the Yankees is my second or third highest owned stack, and the Red Sox I think the Red Sox were second and the Yankees third highest owned.
Okay. Yeah, looking at the top stack tool on Awesemo, which you can get, by the way, by using the promo code or sign-up code Deeper Dive, all one word. Get 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus membership. Stack tool, Awesemo ownership projections, player projections, Fantasy Cruncher add-on, behind the paywall articles from Adam and myself, and a lot of free content that you can check out even if you don't want to sign up, including all of our seasonal NFL content, which we're pumping out every day and we're very proud of. But if there's a sport, the DFS sport that one of these sites offers, we've got content for it. It's that simple. Use the promo code Deeper Dive, one word, when you sign up. Get 50% off, half off your first month of Awesemo subscription. Do you have the stack tool pulled up? It's making me sign back in.
Yeah. So first, I wanted to correct myself. Red Sox were my third highest owned DraftKings team. Yankees were fourth. But yeah, I have the stack tool in front of me.
So what do you have in terms of ownership and top stack probability for both of these guys?
For the Yankees, 15.6% chance of being the highest scoring teams on DraftKings, which is the highest on the slate. 14.8 on FanDuel, tied with the Angels for the highest, and then 14.3 on Yahoo, which is second to the Angels. DraftKings ownership 12.6%, FanDuel 11.7, and Yahoo 9.7. So the Yankees grading out well on all three sites. Boston 9.2% chance on DraftKings of being the high scoring stack, 9.9 on FanDuel, 10 on Yahoo, 9% ownership on DraftKings, 8 on FanDuel, 6.9 on Yahoo. So Boston looking like a good play on all three sites, but the best play on Yahoo.
Okay.
Or best out of the three sites is Yahoo.
And Yankees ownership on DraftKings, FanDuel, and Yahoo is well below their top stack probability.
Yep.
So that's nice to know. Obviously, you have to pay for them, but the good thing about this slate is while there's certain bats you have to pay for, unless you're going Barrios everywhere, which I'm not sure is the best idea, it's not going to be hard to pay for hitting at all.
Yeah, it's because there's no mid-range of pitching, really. You can do whatever you want roster construction-wise.
All right. So next on our list, we've got the White Sox. We've got the Minnesota Twins. By the way, only one 7 o'clock start today, 7 o'clock Eastern time start, 2 at 8 o'clock, and then 3 10 p.m. games. So it's spread out, and there's not a lot early on. This is your 8 p.m. game, 8:10, one of two. Berrios and Giolito. Let's dig into Berrios. Jake and I discussed it on the strategy show at length today because I think, talking statistics and analytics is a lot less important on this slate than just getting an idea of where you can get leverage against the field because Berrios is going to be so popular. But I mean, you've got him across the board as your highest owned pitcher and highest owned player, 46% on DraftKings, 38 on FanDuel, which is crazy on a single pitcher site, 61% on Yahoo. The problem I have, Adam, is not only that he is one of the few pitchers who has considerably and consistently been worse on the road throughout the entirety of his career. I remember you and I discovered this towards the beginning of last season and thinking, oh, it must just be noise. I mean, it really hasn't been. It's not like he's been bad on the road this year, but he's been lights out at home. He's not an extremely proficient strikeout pitcher. As a matter of fact, he has a below average compared to league average strikeout rate this season. I think it's 21.5%. So yes, it's a very good matchup against Chicago, but when he's owned by half or more than half of the field, I just have such a tough time getting behind that, knowing that the likelihood of him hitting his ceiling, and he does that, he will have on occasion a really strong game, but the probability of him hitting his ceiling or giving you, 30 plus DraftKings points is so much lower than so many pitchers that are priced up around him on a nightly basis. The difference on this slate is there aren't any of those pitchers that compared to him here. So where do you fall on Berrios?
Right. I think he's the clear number one pitcher on the slate. Like if you're playing cash games,
right, on paper, clearly on paper, best pitcher. Yeah.
Yeah. If you play against someone in cash games that does not have Berrios, you should be trying to get more action against that person in the future. In tournaments, though, like you said, it becomes a lot more interesting because yes, Berrios is the best play on the best pitcher play on the slate, but it's not by a super wide margin just because of the type of pitcher Berrios is. His strikeout percentage has dropped this year to 21.5%. His walks have dropped as well, which is nice, but he has a 4.46 xFIP. It's not like he's going out there and really shutting guys down, just not getting a lot of strikeouts. This is obviously a matchup that is very conducive to strikeouts, but also like you said with the home and away numbers, even this year, he hasn't been bad on the road, but his K minus BV percentage away from home is 13.4% compared to 19% at home. For his career, it's 18.8% at home, 11.3 on the road. It's a really good matchup, but it's not like you have Jacob deGrom or Chris Sale or something as the number one guy here, and then a bunch of guys in bad matchups or bad pitchers. You have a guy with a 21.5% strikeout percentage. There's many ways that it can go poorly, whether it be, it's baseball. There's, some percentage of the time the White Sox are just going to hit him. He also could just not pick up strikeouts. There's a lot of ways where he's just mediocre. Right now we have him projected for 50% ownership on DraftKings. I expect, with the way things are right now, I'd come in around 30% on Berrios in tournaments.
Okay. Yeah, that seems to make sense to me. Are there any pivots at a similar price point that you're interested in? Meaning, you look up top here, you've got Giolito, who's on DraftKings 10.9, Tanaka at 10.1. I think we discussed that, but is Giolito your pivot, or is it just two mid-range guys and load up on hitters, which I think is perfectly viable strategy tonight? Yeah,
I think it is too, but I am probably going to be overweight on Giolito, just because of talent. It's a really, really difficult matchup against the Twins. But if you look at the pitchers on this slate, there's no real question that Giolito has been the best pitcher this season. He has a 29.7% strikeout percentage. Next highest is Suarez at 25.2 over 7 starts. And then behind that, it's Berrios at 21.5. So just in terms of strikeout numbers, there's no one even in Giolito's class. He's the only pitcher on the slate with an xFIP below 4. He has come back to earth a little bit recently, but I don't think many people expected him to continue dominating to the level that he was early in the season. He's still, overall just a good pitcher. So right now we have him projected at about 17% ownership on DraftKings. I got about %. So where we have the field combining on DraftKings right now for about 65 to 70% ownership on Berrios and Giolito, I expect I end up around 55 to 65%, but mine will be split more evenly between the two.
All right. Yeah, we had an update 10 minutes ago. Giolito at 15, Berrios at 42. So basically a third of his ownership on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Berrios is at 34. I mentioned that already. Giolito is at 14%. And look, it's definitely a less appealing matchup. On Yahoo, 60 to 29%, so half of the ownership there. Definitely a less appealing matchup, but you and I really liked Bieber yesterday just based on the fact that he was the best pitcher on the slate. Like that was all there was to it. And sometimes it works. Yesterday, it definitely worked. The day before that might have been with Clevenger where I had some interest. It didn't work, but you could certainly see it working with Giolito, and Berrios finishes with like 17 fantasy points.
Yeah, exactly. It's just something that I buy into, especially among the top range pitchers. Everyone, pays such close attention to projections as they should, but you have to keep in mind that they're medium projections. And with pitching, with how much analytics goes into pitching these days, pitchers from year to year can make pretty substantial, legitimate improvements. And most projection systems aren't really going to capture that all that quickly because they're accounting for years prior where things were just really really different. So I'm perfectly willing to just on slates with questionable pitching, especially if I think a pitcher is better, more talented than projection systems do. I'm fine with just being overweight on what I think is the best pitcher.
Sounds good to me. Now, do you have interest in bats from this game on either side of the White Sox or Twins?
Yeah, I mean, I'll get to some White Sox just because of leverage against Berrios. He's clearly going to be the highest owned pitcher on the slate. So getting some bats against him is appealing since there's only 12 offenses. The opportunity cost isn't as high to having, some stacks of a team that is low probability. The Twins on the other side, I'll get some just because they have the highest ISO against right-handed pitching in baseball. Giolito, has come back to earth a little bit, and it's just a really dangerous lineup. Really low strikeout percentage, tons of power. So I'll have some exposure to both offenses here, but I'll have more to like the Yankees and the Red Sox game.
Okay, so let's talk about the Indians and the Royals. Excuse me. Cleveland Indians right now on the top stack tool have a 12.4% top stack probability on DraftKings, 12.2 on FanDuel, 12.3 on Yahoo, and they are owned at 9, 8, and 8% respectively. Totals, by the way, get these in there for you. Indians, I don't think it's much of a surprise to anyone, have the third highest total on the slate at 5.5. And on the other side, 4.6 for the Royals against against Adam Plutko. I want to get into these Indian bats for a moment, but before we do, Adam Plutko is also, due to lack of quality options at pitcher, garnering some ownership here. He's right now 20% on DraftKings, only 5% on FanDuel for obvious reasons, and on another two-pitcher site, Yahoo, he's 11%. So DraftKings is where Plutko is clearly getting the most traction. Are you interested in him here? And if so, how much?
I'd say I'm right around the field there. And it's only DraftKings, not interested on FanDuel or on Yahoo. But, Kansas City right now without Adalberto Mondesi, it's a pretty watered down lineup once you get outside of the top four. And Plutko's not a good pitcher, but this is at least the top of this lineup, has 5 out of 6 righties. They did throw some lefties in at the bottom, but they're not particularly good ones. Since debuting last year, Plutko struck out 22% of right-handed hitters compared to about 12.5% of lefties. He gives up power, a ton of power to both sides of the plate. So I think going to guys like Hunter Dozier and Jorge Soler as one-offs makes a lot of sense because they both have ISOs well over 250 against right-handed pitching, and it's a really good spot for power. But beyond them, Merrifield and Gordon have some power, but they're not the scariest bats. Cuthbert, Starling, Lopez, Valoria, Hamilton, it just gets worse as you get on the lineup. So I'll get to some Plutko just because of the price tag, but I still think that I'll get to more of guys like Wade LeBlanc and Drew Verhagen.
Okay. I see. That's where I'm at as well, by the way. I know that LeBlanc's going to be popular, but I just think there's a much better chance of success for LeBlanc here too. We'll get into that matchup in a moment. What are your thoughts on the Cleveland Indians bats here? And if you want to talk about the Royals, we can do that as well. But let's start with Cleveland.
Yeah, I'm getting to less Cleveland than field. They're one of my lowest owned stacks right now, at least. And I think the reason for that is, for one, Mike Montgomery is not a great strikeout pitcher, but he's okay at limiting production. And Cleveland's lineup, I just don't really find that appealing. They don't have a ton of power. And I know they have a high implied run total, but just not a ton of power in the lineup. It's a pretty unappealing stack, I think. And then Montgomery's not really going to garner ownership either. So you're not really getting leverage there. And what I'm looking for in tournaments is either, teams that are projected to be the best, teams that are going to be low owned, and even more importantly, if they're going to be low owned, the team that gets me leverage against a large percentage of the field. And the Indians don't really do any of that for me because they're not supposed to be really popular, but with a 5.5 implied run total, they're not going to go completely overlooked. They're not my best projected team, and Montgomery's getting no ownership. So there's in any of those metrics, there are just teams that pass them.
Okay. Royals?
I'm interested in one-offs more so than full stacks. Like I'm getting to some Kansas City stacks, but I think that I would rather just be using Dozier, Soler, and then maybe one of Merrifield or Gordon as mini stacks.
Okay. So as far as the Cleveland Indians go, if I had to ask you, where would you rank them right now as far as your favorite stacks?
So in my crunch that I did before the show, they were one of my lowest owned stacks, like bottom 5.
Okay. Bottom 5. All right. So bottom half, but not, yeah, because we only got 12.
Like bottom. So I mean, like I'm trying to see who I had less of than looking at 5-man stacks. I had less Detroit. Yeah, I had less Detroit.
Wow. So the only team you have less of than the Indians is Detroit.
In the crunch I did before the show, yeah.
Interesting. All right. Texas and Oakland, Brett Anderson, Ariel Jurado. Again, going back to the strategy show, I found myself, and I believe Jake and I were on the same page. I found myself saying, yeah, I wish I didn't, but I do think that Brett Anderson can be played at this price point. And I honestly think the price of pitching is almost irrelevant today, unless you're talking about maybe Giolito and Berrios. Once you get to some of these cheaper guys, it kind of doesn't matter, assuming you're not going to have a ton of the top priced pitchers. Brett Anderson is $7,900 on DraftKings. On FanDuel, you're going to see a lot less because of LeBlanc's price, but he's also $7,800 there. And then over on Yahoo, very, very, very favorably priced, $29 on Brett Anderson. Right now, we have him projected from an ownership standpoint at 20 or 16% on DraftKings. It came down throughout the day. And then over on FanDuel, we've got Brett Anderson projected to have 6% ownership, half that of Wade LeBlanc, and a third of Jose Suarez, who right now is projected to be really chalky, specifically on FanDuel. What are your thoughts here on Brett Anderson against the Rangers team that we've said countless times is really not good against lefties, is without Joey Gallo, which on one hand you say, well, that kind of sucks because he strikes out so much, but he's also smashed left-handed pitching this season. Pretty interesting spot for old Brett Anderson.
Yeah, I mean, Texas, not the best lineup, and they're missing their best hitter, like you said. I'm still only getting to, 5 to 7% on DraftKings just because you're talking about a pitcher that just does not get strikeouts. So a 12.9% strikeout percentage against righties this year, 8.4% against lefties. Just really nothing to see there. But on Yahoo, I think he's appealing because he's $29. That makes him less expensive than some other guys that are less expensive on DraftKings. So like he's less expensive than Plutko on Yahoo. Jose Suarez doesn't appear to be in the player pool. It's just different pricing over there. So I think he stands out more for me on Yahoo than on DraftKings or FanDuel.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. 29 is really favorable, and like you said, no Suarez, no Verhagen either. I don't think on Yahoo. Maybe I'm wrong.
Looks like you're right.
Yeah, I don't think he's over there. No, he's not. Yeah, they only have and Wade LeBlanc, by the way, is in the player pool, but you have to search for him.
Yeah.
He's $29. So keep that in mind. Any thoughts on Ariel Jurado? I'm going to ask about every pitcher on the slate because there's only 6 games.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting to 5% Jurado at 5,200 on DraftKings also, just because there's so much bad pitching, and I can afford to get to a little bit of questionable guys. But it's a really tough matchup for him. The only thing really working in his favor is that this game is in Oakland instead of in Texas. But against right-handed hitters this year, 222 ISO, 370 WOBA. You're facing a right-handed heavy lineup with tons of power, top 5 ISO against right-handed pitching that has a bottom third strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching. So it's a really dangerous spot. I'm not getting to a ton of Oakland stacks because Yorado's not expected to get much ownership, and uh, Oakland's not, one of my top projected teams. But I do think that if you were looking for, one-offs or mini stacks, they become a little bit more appealing.
All right.
Chapman and Davis in particular.
Yeah, I would think so as well. Do you have any interest in the Texas bats though?
No, they're one of my lowest owned stacks also. Just not an appealing ballpark. Anderson's not like a gas can pitcher, even though he doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. And it's just another team where if you look and you're like, okay, like what 5 guys do I want to grab from Texas? There's nothing that really stands out.
The Rangers are tied for the lowest total on the slate with the White Sox at 3.9.
Yeah.
It's not that surprising either. Like Brett Anderson hasn't been terrible, first of all. And you know what? He's never been terrible. He's just a guy that for a long stretch got a ton of ground balls and didn't miss any bats, but really did a decent job of preventing power, giving up a little bit more power this season. And I mean, I'll tell you what, the strikeout numbers on Anderson, if you want to protect your eyes, don't even look. Like they're really bad at him, but at the same time, the slate is so bad that it kind of doesn't matter. I mean, he has an 8% K rate against lefties and 12.9 against righties, 11.8 overall. This is when you know pitching's bad.
Yeah, it's awful.
So we get to the next game, which features the team with the highest total on the slate. That is the LA Angels and Jose Suarez, who is one of the highest owned pitchers on the slate. So there's a lot to talk about in this game. Even at 82 on DraftKings, Suarez is garnering the third most ownership, basically tied for second with LeBlanc. He's getting the second most on FanDuel at 20%, and he is not on Yahoo. So there's that, which kind of sucks, but what can you do? We'll get to the bats. Oh, and by the way, Eshelman is who we expect to come in relief. Yacobonis, the starter here, should go, I would assume, an inning. But what are your thoughts on Suarez against Baltimore in a, I won't say neutral, slightly pitcher friendly, not what it used to be, but not a terrible park either?
Yeah, so Suarez I like. The price tag on FanDuel is obviously really appealing. I had some people ask me in Slack what I thought about paying down for him because normally I advocate pretty hard for just getting like the best pitchers on FanDuel. But with the way the slate breaks down, I think he's a really good play there because the only real issue with him is that he hasn't thrown more than 91 pitches in any start this year, majors or minors. So and he hasn't gone 6 innings yet in the majors. So there's a really good chance he doesn't put you in line to get the quality start bonus. But he's so cheap that that's not a huge deal. And the opportunity cost of the position obviously is really, really low on tonight's slate. On DraftKings, he's one of my highest owned pitchers too, because he has a 25% strikeout percentage in the majors so far this year. He's just a pretty decent pitcher. He's only 21. FanGraphs has him as the Angels' number 2 prospect. And the Orioles, while if you look at their active roster numbers, they're misleading because Chris Davis is so freaking bad against left-handed pitching, and he's not in the lineup. But it's still not like it's a great Orioles lineup here. There are some dangerous bats. Alberto's been pretty good this year. Mancini's good. Nunez has power. Santander's figuring it out. Severino and VR aren't the worst, but it's still an overall favorable matchup for a pitcher who appears to be pretty decent. And there's not a lot of other options on the slate. So I would say that, as far as just talent goes, once you get out of the Barrios and Giolito range, Suarez is up there with anyone on the slate.
I think he is as well. And I think the ownership is warranted.
You're muted.
I think he is as well, and I think the ownership is warranted here. It's justified, especially on a slate like this, which makes things interesting on Yahoo, Adam, because you see the ownership go to, Barrios is at 60%, right? And I'm not saying these guys are comparable in price, but 60%, and Wade LeBlanc at 42%. and Anderson at 32%. So it's clearly inflating ownership of the guys that we've already talked about.
Yeah, exactly.
Angels hitters. The team has a 6.3 run implied total. 6.5 now. It's the highest on the slate by almost a full run. You've got Yacobonis opening again, and then Eshelman coming in long relief. I don't know how many innings he'll pitch, but he should get the bulk of the middle frames. Where do you have the Angels as far as prioritizing goes? Right now, second highest top stack probability on DraftKings, highest on FanDuel by more than 2%, highest on Yahoo by almost 2%, and the ownership is also going to be up there. I'd say the worst spot for the Angels, just based on ownership, would be FanDuel, but they will be popular everywhere.
Yeah, they'll be popular everywhere, but with the way our ownership is right now, I'm still getting to them as my number one stack.
Yeah, I think you have. Wait, over the Yankees and
Yeah.
Boston? Okay.
Yeah.
By a wide margin?
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So, and again, I haven't adjusted for the ownership projection that came during the show, but using the ownership that we had before the show, I had like 25% as opposed to like 11% on Boston, 9 on the Yankees.
Okay. Fair enough. Talk to me about, well, who do you really like? Obviously, it's a collective effort here, but who are our top guys?
Yeah, so I mean, it's obviously Trout and Ohtani, like always at the top, but then you get some really good value with Justin Upton, who is inexpensive on every site. Andrelton Simmons gives you a reasonable shortstop option. You can be contrarian by playing, Cole Calhoun over one of Trout, Ohtani, or Upton, because a very large percentage of Angel stacks are going to have those three. So there's different ways that you can stack the Angels and be contrarian within a really popular stack. Trout and Ohtani, I think, they're my two highest projected hitters on the entire slate. So that's why I'm going to just get a ton of ownership to the Angels, unless in our final ownership update, the Angels ownership increases and several other teams decrease.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't know. I guess it's possible, but I don't know, because the Yankees ownership seems a little bit lower than I would have expected. We'll see, though. It's definitely possible. Any interest in Baltimore? I know you mentioned a couple of these guys have become decent hitters, but is there anyone that stands out to you as a quality play?
Not really. Severino at catcher at 3,300 was one of the like three catchers I mentioned in the deep dive article today. Jonathan VR, I think, is a really good value option at second base. Obviously, it would be better if he were hitting toward the top of the order, but Anzer Alberto also with second base eligibility leading off. So I think you can go to these guys for some value. Mancini's obviously a good hitter. Nunez has power, but their price tags are a little bit less appealing than Alberto, Severino, and VR.
Okay. What do you say we get to this last game?
Let's go.
All right. Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports sponsors the Deeper Dive, and you can get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points when you sign up through us at awesomemode.com. Yahoo Sports Rewards points as good as cash. Play with them, win money, withdraw that money, or just keep playing and build that bankroll. There's no MME, no 150 entries, 10 entry max, even on their largest contests. Lowest management fees in the industry. And if you get in early each day, you get that 0% management fee on a couple of their contests, which is a pretty cool thing to run. We can't post the link in the YouTube chat anymore, but if you're watching and you haven't signed up and you want to get some free money on the site and you want to check out a new site where you're not going up against the juggernauts of the industry, very simple way to do it. Go to awesomemode.com. You'll see the Spotlight Hitters article on the homepage, and the link is right there, the Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports link. You click that, sign up, use the sign-up code AWESEMO, and you are good to go. Get those $30 and start playing. Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports is the sponsor of the Deeper Dive, and we appreciate them. All right, last one, Seattle and Detroit. Let's do it. Drew Verhagen and Wade LeBlanc. I never thought that these would be two of the best pitchers on any slate.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good, but you have to talk about them. You have to consider them because Wade LeBlanc comes in at 5,800 on DraftKings and 29 on Yahoo, the two sites where you have to roster two pitchers. And Detroit's really, really bad. They have a lot.
Did you see how good they made the Phillies pitchers look? Like Pivetta, 3 scoreless with like no hits and 7 Ks. Hector Neris striking out the side. Vince Velasquez looking like a Cy Young. I mean,
Yeah.
it was bad, man. They are really, really bad. And
Oh yeah, no question.
Heimer Candelario swung at a pitch on a full count that was so far out of the zone. It was so far out of the zone that he tripped over home plate trying to get to the ball. So bad.
Yeah, I mean they're terrible. And you would think that they'd be good against or better against left-handed pitching, but they're really not.
No.
They have a 25.7% strikeout percentage, 94 WRC plus, 312 WOBA. The only thing really working against LeBlanc is, I mean, he's not a strikeout pitcher, but he's only struck out 14.3% of right-handed hitters this year, and there are 8 of them in this lineup. So he should still be able to get some strikeouts because of how bad Detroit is. And there's not a lot of power here outside of Castellanos. But, it's still Wade LeBlanc. One thing working in his favor, though, is that he is following Eric Swanson. So he will avoid at least 3 of Jones, Candelario, Cabrera, Castellanos the first time through. If Swanson gives up a hit or 2, then he can avoid that entire group. So that obviously it's favorable to come in against like Kristen Stewart, Nico Goodrum, Hicks, Mercer before you flip it back over. So it's just, it's a good point per dollar play. He actually projects reasonably well because of how bad Detroit is. I'm trying not to act like I love Wade LeBlanc too much, but in the context of the slate, I do.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense. It's ugly, but it makes sense. What about Drew Verhagen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to get to in my crunch before the show, I got to about 20% of him on DraftKings too. I actually didn't write him up today because I didn't think I was going to end up getting there. But he's 4K flat. He threw 95 pitches in his most recent start at AAA. He's made 11 starts at AAA this season. He's thrown 53.2 innings. He has a 21.9% strikeout percentage, 5.6% walk percentage, 3.91 FIP. Not, outstanding numbers by any stretch, but not terrible numbers either.
Yeah, not dead minimum salary numbers on a 6-game slate that features LeBlanc and Brett Anderson as chalk.
Exactly. That's the best way to put it. He's as talented a pitcher as several on this slate, and
several other shitbags on Thursday night. You could, put it bluntly. It's okay.
Right. And so Seattle has a high implied run total, and I will get to a lot of Seattle, especially because right now we have Verhagen projected for like 28% ownership on DraftKings. So you're getting leverage by going against him. But it's not like his strikeout stuff is worse than LeBlanc, and he's $1,800 less expensive. So I'm going to get there as well, and hope that he gets me like 12 points or something.
All right. I mean, think about it. How much riskier is he than a $7,900 Brett Anderson?
Yeah, I mean, I have Anderson projected for 12.5 DraftKings points. I have Verhagen at 10.4, and you would have to pay 30. You'd have to pay twice as much money for Brett Anderson as for Verhagen.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that working for you. Now let's talk about hitters. Detroit, as you pointed out, they're really not much better against lefties. I mean, they might be marginally better, but they still strike out a lot. They still don't offer much power. I mean, guys like Miggy Cabrera, man, he's got both feet in the grave. Really though, they've become a very, very, very bad team. Like, honestly, if yesterday we were talking about Ronaldo Lopez having the best possible matchup you could draw, right, against Miami, which, by the way, worked out pretty well. I think you could argue that Detroit may have overtaken Miami. That's how bad this team has gotten against righties.
Yeah, against righties. I would say I don't think this is like the best possible matchup for LeBlanc because of how right-handed hitters they
are. No. But neither is Miami the best possible matchup for lefties either.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah. So talk to me. I mean, if there's nothing on Detroit hitters, once again, only 6 games, so I want to cover everything, but if there's nothing on them, we can talk Seattle bats here against Verhagen.
So Detroit is really cheap, which is I think they could get some ownership just because if you stack Detroit, you can probably roster Berrios plus like Suarez or something. And when I crunched before the show, we didn't have an ownership number on LeBlanc, so I had just thrown him in at like 15%. Now we have him at 30, so maybe I get to a couple Detroit stacks just because of that. But still, my least favorite offense on the slate. Park downgrade, really just bad hitters. Like if you look at their numbers against left-handed pitching since the start of last season. Castellanos is phenomenal. I love Castellanos. Play Castellanos. 224 ISO, 179 WRC plus. Cabrera's got a 134 WRC plus, 163 ISO. That's perfectly respectable. 112 ISO for Goodrum. Candelario has been good with a 117 WRC plus, 185 ISO. 0.057 ISO for Stewart. Hicks has a 126 ISO. Dixon's got a 191 ISO, but he has a 72 WRC plus. Jacoby Jones has a 66 WRC plus. Once you get past that top 2, 3, 4 of this order, it's just so bad.
It's really horrible. Are you interested in the Mariners here?
Yeah, they were my second highest owned stack in that crunch that I did before the show, just behind the Angels. Verhagen getting ownership, so they work as a leverage play, and then they're also a highly projected team with a 5.4 implied run total. Verhagen, it put up decent numbers at AAA, but they weren't numbers that you're really scared of. He struggled with lefties more than righties, which we would expect. And you have a very left-handed heavy lineup here. I think Dan Vogelbach's a great play. I think Narvaez is a really strong catcher option. Kyle Seager's free. J.P. Crawford's a cheap shortstop option. So I think Seattle's easy to stack. They have one of my favorite first basemen. They have one of my favorite catchers. And, yeah, so I'm just going to get there a lot.
I think so, too. Well, 6 games. I think we both figured we weren't going a full hour here. It would be very difficult, and it's not that bad of a slate. It's just so much different than most of these other slates because there's very, very, very little pitching that you can rely on. As far as the pitchers go, where do you think is the best move to make in tournaments today? We already discussed Berrios and how, look, the likelihood that he's your top producing pitcher from raw fantasy points is pretty high. I'm not disputing that. But what are the chances that Berrios needs to be in your lineup to win?
Yeah, exactly. I think, you mentioned it's not a bad slate. Yeah, I mean, everyone has the same issues. It's just you have to keep in mind that you're not playing to be right. You're not trying to min cash and say, oh, I played 100% Berrios because I knew he was going to have a good game. He's probably going to have a good game. But the easiest way to make money is to be contrarian on all slates. And that's especially the case when there's a very narrow range of players that the public's going to be on and that you need to have mediocre games for it to pay off. So I still think that I'll probably end up with my ownership basically split between Giolito and Berrios as opposed to playing, 3 times as much Berrios like the field will.
I agree. Favorite mid-range, low-end pitchers? Suarez, LeBlanc, Verhagen, Brett Anderson. Who do you got? Suarez. What about on Yahoo? LeBlanc?
Yeah, LeBlanc. Or actually, no, Anderson on Yahoo.
Same price, Anderson and LeBlanc.
Yeah, I have. I guess I do have LeBlanc projected for more points, so LeBlanc.
Okay. So we come to the top stacks section of today. You already kind of hinted at some teams like Cleveland being way lower down on your list. Who are your top 3 stacks today?
As of right now, Angels, Mariners, and Boston.
Angels, Mariners, and Boston. What about the Yankees for you?
4th.
And are the Angels? Do you have the Angels a lot higher than?
Yeah, the Angels were a lot higher, and then it was Seattle, Boston, and New York basically the same, and then it dropped off another tier to teams like the White Sox, the Twins, the Orioles, the Royals.
All right, we'll head out here. Live Before Loud coming up next, taking you till 7:10 Eastern time. That is first pitch. But any additional advice for a slate like this? Any ways to change things up to get leverage? I think we've touched on a lot of it, but just to close it out here since we have a few minutes.
It's just a slate where if you're making good lineups, in a lot of them, you're not going to feel comfortable. But it's kind of just a necessary evil on slates like this, I think.
That'll do it for us. Hey, before you head out, if you like the show and you want to help support us and support the channel and support the site, give us a thumbs up, like the video. Simple thing to do, but it goes a long way, and we really appreciate it. Subscribe, hit the notification bell as well. Until next time, Adam and I'll catch you back here on the Deeper Dive. Good luck tonight. See you back here tomorrow. Actually, I believe you'll be doing it with our boy Spags.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Am I
First time
gonna
doing a
be
show with him, so looking forward to it.
Nice. Spags is a very, very, very good host, so you'll be in good hands. We will see you back here soon on the Deeper Dive. Good luck tonight. Live Before Lock coming up next. Peace.